Hey, welcome to another episode of the Not Scrum Dumb podcast. I'm your co-host, Andreana Marshall, and that's my amazing co-host.
Grand Scrum Master Scott. Greetings, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking about 5 common challenges a new Scrum Master might face. We'll get right to it. The first one is becoming a meeting scheduler, facilitator of every situation, of every meeting, every event. Scott, what do you think about this one?
I will take the facilitator of everything. I will start there. I can see how a Scrum Master, if you're starting on a team, that you should be facilitating in the beginning because you may be teaching, you may be ensuring that they're running this event the proper way. And that is a way that if you are facilitating, you can be teaching at the same time in the same event. But after a while, you got to think to yourself, is the team going to grow? Is there somebody else on the team? Maybe you want to develop, maybe to get in this position to run whatever event it may be. Could that be a way to develop their personal skill set? But if you're always doing it, I think that's going to stunt the growth of the team at some point in time, Andriana.
Yeah, and I think this goes well beyond just the events. This goes into a developer wanting to talk to another developer and thinking their Scrum Master should set up that meeting for them and facilitate that conversation when it doesn't make any sense to do that. So, this is the challenge of the Scrum Master being seen as the assistant. And I think you have to go back to the Scrum Guide and what are you doing during the day and making sure that you're actively helping the team deliver value. You're actively helping the leaders understand how to work in this Scrum and Agile environment so that you are not so bored at work that people think you can be their assistant or that you even have time for something like this. So I think that's really important to go back to what is your role? What are you not doing during the day? And think about how you are allowing the team to rely on you as the meeting scheduler for anything beyond the events. Your job is to make sure the events happen. That's a totally different story. But I think outside of that, you're starting to see Scrum Masters be very high paid assistants because some people aren't being strong in their role. And so that leads us to number 2, which is maybe you're a Scrum Master or some Scrum Masters face this challenge where they are very strong in their role and sometimes they become a bit overbearing and they're giving solutions to the team instead of helping the team be self-managing. Scott, you want to take this one?
This is definitely a huge challenge for Scrum Masters that we want to solve the problem quickly, but we got to take a step back and say, okay, are we helping the team be self managed if we always jumping in and providing a solution? One example I'm thinking about is typically on a team I have, I'm missing somebody that we need. It could be an architect. So let's say we don't have an architect on our team, and that architect may be scattered out over different teams. And a developer comes to me and say, "Hey, Scott, we need some assistance from an architect. We have an impediment." They looking for me to do something about that. I'm like, "Well, can you go talk to the architect yourself, perhaps?" Oh, I didn't think about that. So they coming to me to go talk to the architect or whomever this person may be, that member that we need on our team. It could be a dependency or a blocker from us getting to done. And they come into the Scrum Master for a way for us to resolve that impediment. But my question to them is that something that you could do? Maybe we go together. But I just don't want to keep doing that myself because, again, that's not helping the team get to a point of where we becoming self-managing.
Yeah, great point, Scott. I think the only thing I'll add is I've seen this a lot with people trying to prove themselves or even very experienced people who feel like they have that right answer and they just want to make sure the team has that. But this, as a Scrum Master, it's also coaching them to where they can come up with their own solutions. So when you're on vacation or not available because you're coaching the organization or you're leading trainings in your org, they can solve these problems and they're not 100% dependent on you to the point where they can't be self-managing. And so that also takes us to number 3, which is a Scrum Master that doesn't know the Scrum Guide. This is really problematic because if you're not regularly reading your Scrum Guide and you have a deep understanding of it, you're not able to teach your team, your organization, just Scrum itself, but also the why behind the events, artifacts, the way it's structured. That's going to be really important for collaborating with team members and also just getting buy-in. That's really important with something like Scrum. And I think when you're doing it the way it was designed, you'll get a lot more buy-in. Scott.
That's a very good point, not knowing the Scrum Guide. One common challenge that I have in a lot of environments is I join a team for the first time, and a lot of teams are not really happy with Scrum. When I sit down with them and ask why, as I'm listening to them, I know Scrum at a higher level, but I'm listening to their explanation of Scrum. And in my mind, I'm like, that's not Scrum. That's not Scrum. That's not Scrum. So you're not liking something because you've never done it. So I take a step back with that person. How about this? You give me 30 days while I'm here. We have a one-on-one in 30 days and see if we can't come back to the table and see if you see any change because I'm going to show you real Scrum. Just please give me an opportunity to show you real Scrum, not what you've seen by some other person, some other environment or whatever. Give me an opportunity for you to see it and experience it. Then we'll reevaluate it again in 30 days. And typically when I say that, they more than open to do that. I meet with them in 30 days and everything is all good.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point of stripping all the non-Scrum elements away, starting with just Scrum and allowing the team to create their own norms will significantly help their improvement and their path to success. So, speaking of now knowing the Scrum guide, the fourth thing is skipping events. Now, when you're skipping events, you're missing opportunities to increase transparency and to inspect and adapt. The whole point, Scrum is based off empiricism. You're literally eliminating an opportunity to be empirical when you do something like that. Again, it's understanding the Scrum Guide. A lot of these challenges go together. It's a domino effect. When you're missing one, it's all of a sudden these other things are missing, and then all of a sudden you're failing as a Scrum Master and your team's not delivering. But Scott, do you have anything for this one?
I've seen this as well, Andreana, skipping events. And typically in the environments I've been in, it just might have been a production situation that happened where all the teams need to be hands on deck. And typically it's the retrospective. Hey, we've been up all night working on this here bug or defect or whatever, whatever. Can we skip retrospective today? Uh, can I keep your paycheck this week and not pay you for your work that you've done? Well, no. That we do retrospective. We got to do it. Those are mandatory events. Again, it goes back to point number three, not teaching Scrum. If we're doing Scrum, we got to do all of the events, and that's a mandatory event. So please don't allow people to skip the events.
The fifth and final challenge that new Scrum Masters face or new to a Scrum team is taking suggestions that my other team does this. That way of doing things and that way of thinking. For example, oh, I've heard of other teams using story points, or my other teams use story points really well, or they only wrote in user stories. Things like that that aren't mandatory and aren't necessary. I work with teams that use user stories, and I also work with teams that do not. It doesn't matter. Just understanding what's the important thing, not trying to say, oh, my other teams are doing this and you have to do that because that equals success, allowing the teams to create their own norms. Got it?
I would say that is a big challenge with Scrum Masters. That's something I've never done, but when I'm sitting in an environment where I see Scrum Masters come on board and the first thing they do when they meet their team, they might be in their first sprint retrospective and they talking about what they did on their last team. And I'm reading the body language of everybody that's in the room and I can see very clearly on their face, I don't care what your last team did, but they still going on and on about their last team. No, learn your team and learn what works with your team because every team is going to be different. So, yeah, you may be able to take some elements from in terms of what you did in the last team, but I really wouldn't start out. I really wouldn't say that unless they ask me. Well, Scott, what did you do on your last team? I didn't volunteer that information, but when I was asked, okay, yeah, my last team, we did this just as a way to brainstorm and come up with some different ideas for us to get past a problem that we was facing at the particular time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. There's a difference between offering ideas and mandating it. I worked with an engineering manager who came over and said, this is the way that Jira should be structured. And all the current Jira issues had to be migrated and transitioned. It was a mess. Product didn't like it. The developers didn't like it. I stood firm to I'm not touching any of this because I also don't agree with this. It was a total disaster, and that was one of many poor decisions that happened in the course of a year or so. It's just one of those things where you could do things many different ways. Respecting others and how they work and respecting the team's decision is really important. All right, those are the 5 common challenges that Scott and I see. If you know of other challenges, write them in the comments. If you have questions, write them in the comments, and we will create a video off of those. We'll respond back, and maybe we'll turn it into a video. So you can also join our newsletter, see the description. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn's are in the description. And if you made it to the end of this video, that means you have an attention span greater than a goldfish.
Be legendary, everyone, but not Scrum Dumb with your challenges.